You're listening to the Property Management Excellence Podcast for insights that drive rapid rental growth.
Welcome back. Great to have you with us. PMX, Alex Whitlock. I'm a director of REB. I'm also a co-founder of Managed. Diving into another episode. Look, I'm keen to focus in this particular episode, look in quite a granular way at really sort of unpack an agency that's been extremely successful in terms of growth. They are what, for me, embodies a next-gen agency. So I'd like to have an opportunity to catch up with somebody who's really driving that, look, not in isolation, but it's particularly interesting coming from a sales background, but having such a crystal clear view of the value of a rent roll and moreover, how to support its growth and development. So look, I'd like to introduce to you Tim Harris. He's a director and a founder of H&B Real Estate down in Melbourne. Been incredibly successful at building his business. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, appreciate your kind words and happy to be here.
Before we get into it, Tim, look, it'd be good to get a little bit of background for yourself. What took you into real estate and how you started out in the business?
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Well, I originally started out with a sports background and had a very much a performance sort of driven sort of past, I guess, as a sports player. Like I was an AFL footballer and I guess didn't quite get to the heights that I wanted to. So I was left with a fair bit of ambition inside of me and found my way to a real estate just by chance. I met a sales agent when I was selling a farm that I'd sort of purchased with my dad, and we'd renovated. We'd put stockyards and fences and cleaned it up, and then we decided to sell it. And I was 33 and I was probably at a bit of a loose end because my sports interest had taken me so far, but I just really needed a new career. And he said, I think you'd be good at real estate, and as long as you don't get in it for the money, then you'd be great. And I said I don't even know anything about the industry. I wouldn't know whether it's well paid or not well paid. So I started from there, and he just said, come down and work at my little shop. And he was sort of going out the industry, so he was retiring, but he was a very, very good agent, and he did give me a great start because he had a philosophy that was, if you're going to do something, do it properly, and he had a good attention to detail, but he also let me do it my way. He didn't say, oh, you've got to sell this way or you've got to do this. He just said, look, you've got to reach these targets. We need to make sales. We need to make money. That's our business. But, find your own niche, find your own way. And I think he just empowered me to be myself. And that's sort of like the ethos that I bring to my team every day. Know yourself and be yourself, and you'll be the most successful version of yourself if you can do that. So
I think there's something very refreshing, Tim, in accidental entrance into a particular career and profession. I'm a salesman by trade, but again, I fell into sales. I won't bore anyone with my story, but sort of similar age, I fell into media sales. I'd worked in retail for a long time in the UK. I was an accidental salesman, and I grew to love it, and I became good at it. And I think it's really interesting to see your story that somebody's actually spotted something in you that maybe you didn't recognize in yourself, and give you an entry into a profession that you've done extremely well in.
Most definitely. And I would agree with you. I think if I look back on my life, and I'm sort of 52 now, so I'm sort of getting there, but if I look back on my life, the best things that happened to me in life all happened by accident, actually. They just were fateful incidents that, I met my wife that way, and we all meet partners that way, but just a lot of very accidental things. And even my relationship with my now business partner, who is from Germany, and is, as you know, a big part of our team and drives the property management division. Again, it was an accidental, meeting, and we've sort of now been going strong for 10 years together, just, working on building and growing, not just the business, but also personally as well. And I think that's important. But I'm a big believer that, life puts you where you're meant to be. And if you just focus on where you are, then, you'll find your way forward. So
I'm a big believer that we're surrounded by opportunity all the time, but often Look, all of us at times can be a bit blinkered. Some people go through life completely blinkered. They look at some sort of linear line in front and expect everything to line up perfectly, but there are opportunities all around. And again, and we'll get into it a little bit later, Tim, but looking at your business, because you've grown incredibly quickly, but not just grown quickly, you've made very, very astute acquisitions whilst going through some very strong organic growth with your property management business. And the reason why I was very keen to have an opportunity to talk to you on the podcast is because, we've had on the show, we've had some heads of property management from major groups. We've had very focused PMs who work in the trenches and are very good at growing their business. But for yourself as a sales agent, and now I learn, sort of previously somebody successful in the field of sports, to see the opportunity that sat in front of you, which most sales agents miss. What was the point that you switched on to the value and significance of building a rent roll?
I think, let's say our business is now 11 years, maybe coming on 12 years of age. And I think that although it was if you looked at it, the last 3 or 4 years are massively explosive growth, I think that our first 5 or 6 years we're laying the foundation. So it's like everything in life, if you get that right foundation, then the growth can happen quickly. And I think obviously my business partner was the catalyst for that to happen, because I needed that support and I needed his skill set as well as my skill set. So he was definitely a major catalyst. And in some ways, I did stumble on the property manager. I always knew it was powerful, and we grew an organic list because we knew it was powerful. But I did stumble probably on just how powerful it was by stumbling on my business partner, because he wasn't a salesperson and he wasn't suited to the industry. But he wanted to be in my business because he said, I can help your business. And so it got me thinking about how many of us in the industry are salespeople, but there's very few of us that are actually business people. And so stumbling on him and realizing that he wasn't conventional and he didn't fit into a traditional sort of sales role or a traditional real estate role. But I embraced him and I said, look, I know you've got unbelievable potential. So come on board and let's find how you can plug into our system. And so what he's brought on is a very much a desire to grow through acquisition, but also through systems and technology and efficiency. And I think those things are the key to any business, really, as we want to be successful.
I was really struck, Tim, the first time I met you face-to-face down in Melbourne, because I knew how big and how fast-growing your property management business was, and knowing that you were the principal and that you were in charge of sales, I envisaged an equally large sales force. And when you said, no, I just do the sales myself, I'm focused on growing property management, I was actually quite staggered by that. It's an interesting. So you made a decision that you're going to handle sales and you're very, very good at what you do, but your focus and your bandwidth that is into building that side of the asset management side of the business. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that if I decided to really put attention into the sales growth, then we have to look at it as a completely different vehicle, and it's a completely different challenge. And that may be a good idea as we, obviously scale further. But I think that, the foundation or the foundational income that property management provides is your best starting point. Every time I've tried to incorporate a new salesperson into the team, it was a real distraction from me to sell, and it took a lot of energy. And a lot of these salespeople that I would train weren't either committed longer term or they disappear. And so I'm thinking, well, I'm wasting a lot of time here. So let's focus on building those landlords and building those clients that'll be with us for, years to come and provide us with a good income stream, with the hope that we probably will build a sales team down the track. But it certainly, it would have been more of a distraction, if we had tried earlier than this point.
Well, I think it's been very successful. Look, it'd be good, Tim, to get a bit of a snapshot of, if we can talk about what your rent roll was 4 or 5 years ago and what you've grown it to today. And then we'll start to look at how you've gone about doing that.
Yeah, so we would have grown from about 120 organic properties. When I say organic, like I came from country to city to start the business, and I only had about 12 months in the city before I opened up my own shop. I already had 10 years experience in country real estate, but, I didn't have any contacts in the city or nothing. So I had to start underneath a staircase, literally with one client. So it was pretty tough, but we took, that 5 or 6 years to get 120 clients. My wife, who's also a partner in the business, but she was a part of that support process, but she's not a businesswoman. She was supporting the organic growth, and I was doing pretty much everything, sales and property management up until that point. So let's say 5 years ago, we went from 120 and we'll be just shy of 1,000, at the moment. So it's a pretty good growth in 5 years for sure.
That's a significant rent roll in the and your territory at the moment, Tim. And I know that it's growing as you acquire. So you're based around the Brunswick area. Where does your territory?
Yeah. Well, essentially it's Brunswick, but you would say north, sort of inner northwest, sort of northeast. But I would say too that because I grew my original organic list was grown without a territory focus. It was grown with a client focus, and I was on my own. So I couldn't, just because a vendor was one suburb away, I couldn't turn around and say, "Oh, you're too far to travel."
Yeah.
I had to take what I could get. So by the nature of our business, we were client driven, not territory driven, and so that sort of meant that we had a broader area that we managed as well. And we've continued to try and keep it fairly tight, but we have also, plenty of properties today over in the southeast as well, but tends to be more in the inner circle, as you know, because we prefer the apartment stock over the house stock.
There's going to be a lot of people tuning in that I know will feel sort of apprehensive about the thoughts of going through acquisition. It's a daunting process. And now I know that you've gone through this process with your team on a number of occasions now. Just cast your mind back to the first acquisition that you went through. How did it crop up and how did you evaluate it? And what was the decision process to actually go ahead and take that jump?
Yeah, the decision process actually was quite a critical one because we were three of us in the team. That was, part wife or life partner. She was working full time and still is, and then there was my business partner, Tim. So there's two Tims, and that we reached a point where I was doing about $500,000 in sales a year, but it was killing me. It was absolutely killing me. Like, it's a lot of sales for one person to do and then run, the other part of the business. So I said to the team, we all have to start taking responsibility. I've had enough of trying to pay all the bills, so I'm going to sell up and move on, unless we change and have a different strategy in a different direction. I said the property management side of things, I think we could make work, but I'm not prepared to go down that path unless I get 100% commitment from everybody. And at that point, that was when we said, okay, well, we can borrow, on our current organic list up to about $500,000. And so we got a bank involved. We then, realised what our borrowing capacity was, and we started to look at lists that were, we thought attractive. I think that the first list we looked at, we had a couple of misfires where I just lost confidence in the agent that was selling the list, or the list itself just seemed like it was, a little bit risky. I think there's a challenge when you look at a list and it's got big returns against it. Then you're also, the higher the returns, the higher the risk of that list, because if they're, property management's at 7 and 8% commissions, well, then also those clients could very easily find more competitive pricing out in the marketplace. So it's all very well to go, oh, that's a lucrative list and that's a really, a good list to obtain. But you've got to remember that, if you're buying that list, that's got a high percentage against each property, well, those property owners could essentially walk after their retention period. So that was sort of my initial fear was, I think I prefer a list with lower lower fee structures to reduce the potential loss. But yeah, since then we've got a sort of probably a revised view on that as well. Having gone through several transactions, we sort of feel like even our perception of that element of the purchase has changed somewhat. Yeah.
What size was that first acquisition?
It was just over $1 million in purchase price, and it was roughly. It was about 100 and sorry, I tell a lie. It was just over 750,000 in purchase price, and it was about 165 properties thereabouts. Yeah,
it's a lot of money at stake.
Yeah, there's a lot of money at stake, and I will say to anybody that begrudges our success down the track that we've succeeded, and excuse the phrase, balls to the wall. Like we have succeeded with guns to our head, and I refer to our government, I refer to the COVID, I refer to the legislation that not only our landlords suffer under at the moment, but we do as well as agents, and we've succeeded not because of assistance and support from the powers that be, but we've succeeded despite them. And that's the reality of a lot of people that are succeeding in our industry. We have to be better than all of those other things that are trying to support us. They're not supporting us at all. Unfortunately, we're just fighting essentially a pretty tough battle. But that makes you stronger, and it makes you better, and it makes you more efficient. And so here we are today. Yeah.
I think that's a good point for us to take a break. And when we get back, Tim, I'm just going to go into why I met you in the first place, because it's going to lead me into the next part of this podcast, which is really looking and understanding the customer, the buyer, the owner, the landlord, and of course also the tenant, and how that factors into a strong property management proposition. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Great to have you with us. I've got Tim Harris with me from H&B Real Estate, Alex Whitlock with you, PMX. We're digging into in my mind, one of the most successful agencies in terms of growth, in terms of understanding their customers, and in terms of understanding the realities of what I see as being the next generation of real estate, specifically from a PM and also from a sales perspective. So, Tim, it's interesting how we cross paths originally. So I was as a buyer, and I've been an investor for 30 years, and I thought, I'll have a crack at buying without using a buyer's agent, because I got a bit tired of paying buyer's agent fees, and I'm a big fan of Melbourne. So I was going to buy a property, and I'd got one property with your agency, with the other Tim. You're a customer of Managed, so I put my properties with Managed customers. Yep. So I contacted Tim Oldenburg and said, look, I've got this 2-bedder. I'm going to buy this 2-bedder in Carlton. I've worked out it's going to be sort of 5% yield. I'd like to put it with you guys because you're good, blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the email, I said to Tim, I said, what do you think? And it was very, very interesting how things moved from there. So Tim said, well, what you're looking at buying is near a graveyard. It's a thoroughfare for traffic going north. It says it's Carlton, but it isn't really Carlton. And at that point, I thought, I'm going to give this guy a call. So I hadn't actually spoken to Tim before. So I phoned him up and I said, okay. He went, look, what is it you want? I said, look, I'm looking for yield. He went, look, I can get you in excess of 7% yield straight away because I've got something on my rent roll. So he goes, but it's not a 2-bedder, it's a 1-bedder, and it's not in Carlton, it's in Brunswick. And I went, look, I want yield, and 7.5% or 7.8%, I think it actually was for that particular purchase. I went, look, that ticks the boxes. So then very quickly, he passed me on your number. We hadn't met, had a conversation with you. The reason I bring this in to the equation, and now you've helped me grow my portfolio, both of you, which are on your rent roll, and I'm very, very happy. And it's a win-win relationship because I'm getting what I want, which is high yield properties. You're growing your rent roll. You're helping me to buy. So really looking at the latter part now of this podcast, I want to really talk about the customer. And I think you guys and certain other agencies really understand the investor and really understand the big opportunity to work with them for the long term. Has that always been your mindset, or has this been an evolution of discovering this through growing your property management proposition?
No, I think it was something that I was given when I was young. I grew up on a farm, and we all had to pitch in and work together, and our neighbours were our best friends, and they needed milk and we needed meat, and you'd swap merchandise, and you looked after each other. I mean, that was sort of ingrained in our upbringing. So I sort of, right from the very get-go, when I started to work with sales, I had this idea that, well, if I just sell and look after one client at a time, surely I'll succeed. And that's all I focused on, since I've been in real estate. So that wasn't difficult for me. But I think that what I realised, I didn't realise, but I realised as I grew into the industry, was just how vested interest on other industry providers, and how much vested interest influences their service to clients, and in a negative way, and I realised that, we have to be very, very consciously aware of our vested interest when we're dealing with clients, and make sure that we don't let that vested interest cloud the objectivity of what we're trying to achieve for the client, because that's then lost, I think, on the client, and the client suffers. So for me, the best thing is to say, well, I want to focus on what I can be sure is mutually beneficial for both of us, which is a long-term relationship. How do we get to a long-term relationship? Well, we first of all must make sure that the transactions that we manage or handle or encourage are positive ones. If somebody buys a property through me and it's a horrible property, it's hard to imagine that they're going to want to do business with me down the track, even if they like me, even if they think my service is good. So I fundamentally, think that if you get the property right and then you start to build from there, then you're on the right pathway. So, but don't cloud that initial decision with other short-term goals. I want to get a sales commission, or I want to get this, or I want to get that. Just stay focused on, okay, let's make it a good property purchase and make it a smooth transition. So. Yeah.
It was an interesting interaction with you. Again, like I say, it was an accidental relationship with you guys. I could easily have just had the one property, which we won't go into now because I'm selling it. It's not a great property, but it wasn't purchased by you. But I could have. It could have just sat there and stayed there. And it was again, we sort of talked at the beginning of this podcast, right, Tim, about opportunity presenting itself. And here's the thing, where I have a conversation with your counterpart, Tim, and suddenly an opportunity presents itself. I bought now 4 properties with you. The last one that you helped me purchase, I've got 8.2% yield on. They've all been north of 7.5. Yeah. So but what I want to sort of come back to is really the customer, of which I am, sort of yours and with other agencies. It's pretty tough being an investor. And before we took the break, you were noting how tough it is for anyone in the whole business of real estate. You're kind of treated as pariahs, whether you're an agent or whether you're an owner.
Correct.
You're not treated well now by the government, local and federal. You're kind of, you're referred to, all of us, in fairly unpalatable terms, something that myself, my business partner, Phil Tarrant, are very much on the front foot on, from a media perspective. But I think understanding owners and investors, and I'm going to tell you now, a lot of property managers don't. They're so busy doing the doing. They've got this disconnection with their customer, and there is this golden opportunity to have this long-term relationship, long-term mutually beneficial relationship. So you guys have identified that.
Look, I think you're right about the confusion in the marketplace. There's just so much information out there and so much misinformation, and of course, in property's like a national sport for Australians, and everybody's got an opinion. It's like, who should coach the English national team to go to the World Cup? Everybody's got an opinion, and that they're all will argue and disagree, and that's sort of what property is like to Australians. So, I think the average person probably watches so much social media and comes back more confused than they started. And so I think what clients need in this current marketplace is they need black and white information. They need solid ground from which to go, that is real, and that is something that's tangible, rather than something that might be just a pipe dream, or, what if, because there's a lot of things that might be a what if out there. So, I'll give you an example where we had a young bloke working for us, and he was actually somebody that I known for a long time, and he sort of said, I don't want to be in property. I've got my money in shares. And I said, well, I think property is a good option for a young fella. And he said, no, that's fair enough. And he worked with us for 6 months, and I knew that he wasn't probably going to stay in property management. But I said, look, I know you can help us out, and I know you're well enough that you'll do a good job. So if it's not for you, you're welcome to move on. Anyway, eventually I said to him, you should buy a one better in the current market. Why don't you have a look at the best one betters out there? And he goes, what should I buy? I said, I'm not going to tell you that. I said, you put together a list of the best one betters you can find, and I'll help you to sort through that list. So he did that. He didn't find one there that I'd found, and I put that on the list, and eventually he did buy that one, not because I forced him to, but just simply because it was the best buy. He paid $232,000 for a one better in Ascot Vale, which is a strong suburb. And this is only, sort of 12 months ago. So we're talking a short time frame ago. And he did a small renovation on it, and he picks up $440 a week rent, and the place is not going to give him any headaches. Fantastic outcome. Now, having had that outcome, he's got a new job, and he's moved up to Sydney. He sends me a text the other day, and he goes, oh, Tim, I'm thinking about, I want to buy another one. And I'm looking at this buyer's advocacy service that maybe I should use. And I said, oh, that's interesting. What's the details? And he shares the screenshot, and it's going to cost him basically $20,000 to get someone to help him buy a property. And so I ring him, and I said, okay, I'm trying to understand how a bloke who just went through an unbelievably successful property purchase, who's already got about probably 10 to 20% equity in that property now, why would you want to engage someone else to do the job for you when you've got me as a mentor to help you, and you've just proven to yourself that you can do it? He goes, oh, I'm just not sure. And he got all, I said, look, the reason why I helped you was to, help you to learn how to fish, not just to go and be giving you the fish up front. You learned how to do it. So why go and give your power away to someone else? Take it, do it. I'll help you. Anyway, it just shows, I think, how confused people can get. He's already had a successful experience, and he's still going to revert back to trusting someone else. And, I find that unbelievable, to be honest. I just,
what, Tim? It's so myself and Phil, been in media a long time. We launched Smart Property Investment probably 15 years ago, because I've been investing for a long time, and I get so sick of the nonsense woven by people that want to make money out of investors. They'll ignore all the costs. They ignore all sorts of, they mislead people in terms of the money that's there to be made. Now, I believe very strongly in property investment. I always have done. I love it as well. Like, I really thoroughly enjoy the whole process of buying investment property, and yes, providing, rental accommodation, good quality rental accommodation to Australia's renters is very important to me, and I enjoy it. But here's the thing with property managers and people, professionals such as yourselves, right? It's a complicated, it is not a matter of, great, I'll buy this and I double my money and I'm out and it's all loads of net profit, and isn't it easy? You've got, and look, there are some very good buyers advocates and buyers agents. I'll tell you what, there's 90% of them are pretty miserable or know better than anyone else, right? But they don't have a long-term relationship really with the customer. But the property manager does, and they are in this unique position with people like me to partner with them, because you're aligned, right? I've bought the property, all right, all the excitement's gone. I've bought it, I've paid my money, I've paid them their fee. We're now getting tenants. Now is where the real work begins. You've got to make sure that the property is maintained, that it's compliant, that you're getting market rent, that you're not trying to charge too much and risking vacancy rates, that you're not undercharging. So your property manager is completely aligned in all of those objectives, and you get on with the real work of investing with your property manager. And in the unique situation, with yourselves, where you're also a very active sales agent, and you've helped me buy properties that I bought one on your rent roll, but I bought three that aren't on your rent roll. And the same for the young bloke you've helped out.
Well, the thing is that there's actually no incentive for me to sell you a property that's on my rent roll, because it's already on my rent roll and I might be able to sell it to a different investor. But there is that's why I love it, because I can look at any property and I can choose what's the best property. So I don't, sure, in theory you go, oh, I'll sell what I'm trying to sell over here that's on my rent roll, and it saved me doing a job. But I'm going to sell that anyway. The reality is it gives me a neutral platform to find the best property for you, because I want that best property to become part of my business as well as your business. So I think that's a really important part of, what we've helped you with, but what we can help others with as well. But I suppose the other thing is that, our model's quite different to the traditional property management platform, where we have a leasing manager, and that leasing manager is a partner in the business. And that leasing manager, his job is to understand, where value is at. And we've got to keep pushing values to their limit. Now, there's a reason why that's important, because having market value rents and not undervaluing rents is what underpins the investment. But it also makes tenants grow up and accept the reality that they need to try and buy a property at some stage as well. So people say to me, you push tenants to pay more money. I push tenants to understand there's a commercial world out there, and if they think that they can operate outside of the commercial reality, then they're off their absolute troppo. So it's best they get it sooner rather than later, and it's best that they grow up sooner rather than later and understand that ownership, well, there's two ways you want to live in the world. You can live by the Russian model and go and live in a subordinate sort of fashion, or you can live by a westernised idea, which is about ownership of property. It's about taking responsibility for our choices. I know which one I belong to, and I understand where I come from, and I encourage others to embrace, ownership as a concept for the best way for us to live together. Because that way everybody's, more likely to fit into each other and help each other and things like that. But yeah, that's what I like to. I mean, our leasing model is very powerful because it's an experienced leasing person that will push values not beyond their limits, but always to the limit. And that means that, the investor gets the maximum value, but also that the marketplace is tested with reality constantly. And, the old model used to be a property manager, inexperienced, trying to manage too many things, including leasing the property. And that's one of the things, if we go back to the acquisition of our rent rolls, how we've added value is because we've bought all these properties in, and we've been able to increase rentals to their true market value, which is sometimes up to 25% higher. So yeah, that's important.
And I know that, and I'm not going to go into details, because when I talked to your counterpart Tim, he said, "Oh, I want to keep our secret sauce quite quiet." But you've got an uplift on the investment if you're buying a rent roll that's below market value. Immediately, you pay X amount, and
Correct.
then you've immediately, if you recognise that these, and there's two things, right? There's for you as the agency, and then there's for your customers, the landlords that you're working with. It's a dual 100%. Benefit. You get an uplift on your investment, they get an uplift on their investment when you see that you can get a better rental for them.
Absolutely, and it's about recognising who our client is as well. I mean, ultimately, our client is the landlord. It's the owner of the property. Now, we also have a responsibility and an obligation to our tenants, and we 100% make sure that we fulfil that responsibility. And we're very, very professional in the way that we manage our properties. We make sure that we comply with all the rules and regulations and give our tenants every opportunity to have the best experience of the property. I was a tenant until I was 33, so I know what that's like. And I don't want any tenants to have a bad experience, but I also can't, pander to tenants, and I can't, I can't give tenants below value rents or favours. That doesn't work. And that's what's happened in our industry, with this concept of, leave the rent where it is because the tenant's a good person, or the tenant's having, financial challenges, or this and that. And it's not up to me to play God. It's not up to my team to play God. It's up to us to provide the service that we're paid to do to our landlord, and that's to get them market value rent. And we must stay focused on that at all times,
That's very refreshing, Tim. Look, and very honest. And I think there needs to be more honesty in talking about property management. There's an awful lot of woe is me, and I get very tired of hearing about woe is me, but there is a growing cohort of very realistic focused businesses that know where they're going and they understand what their value proposition is. And I don't hear any of the kind of the woe is me stuff from yourself and from many of the other people. Looking forward, and thank you very much for being so candid about your journey, the people who work with you. You've got a relatively lean team for such a large rent roll.
Yep.
But what is, to give us a bit of a snapshot, I'm sure people will be curious to know, what does the future look like for H&B?
Yeah, so we've just been able to secure a base that we needed, which gives us a great capacity now for more team members to be brought in. But it's well located in Brunswick, so that's sort of been a big moment for us. And we're sort of very satisfied to have reached that point. I think that human growth is very much a part of what the future is about. So, our team members, I think we're sort of roughly 6 or 7, including, when you include partners and so forth. But those team members, I sit down regularly with, and my role with them is to help them to be more successful human beings. And I tell them straight, I want to help you to have a better life. So, yeah, there's things that you need to be able to learn in your role with H&B, and there's accountabilities there that you need to focus on and deliver day-to-day outcomes. And in regards to those roles, Tim Oldenburg's very much the bad cop, and I have the luxurious position to be the good cop, and so I really look forward to helping these young individuals who are really driven to be, fantastic at what they do. And I said to them all along, and I'll say it, that once you've been good at something, very good at it, then you can transfer those skills. And essentially that's all I've done. Like, for me, everything's a game of football, and I was a very good footballer, and I've just transferred the fact that I was very good at that. It took me a long while, but I've transferred it into something else now. But skills are transferable, but you first of all have to be able to go through all of those levels of self-discipline and commitment and focus and whatever all of those other elements are, and really succeed at something. And then you can take that and you can succeed at everything, in my opinion.
I think success is very, very important. And in business, you've got to set a business out to succeed. If you want to be an also-ran, you might as well pack up shop. And look, never mind real estate, I look around in all areas. There is a lot of pedestrian businesses out there. And guess what? It's a pedestrian experience for the people who work in it. Look, I'm not a sportsman, but I am competitive, and I like winning. And with myself here, with my team, I've worked with people who also like winning, and they're not all the same as me. But you know what? I think it's an opportunity. It's quite a magnetic and healthy culture to say, let's be the best that we can be, and let's get out there and let's deliver excellence to the people we engage with, and let's be in it to win it.
Yeah, I suppose winning was what you try and do as a sports person. But I think I was unfortunate enough to go through a loss in my life. I lost my daughter actually when she was 15, and my wife and I sort of had to go through that very challenging period. And it taught me a lot about control. And so I don't sort of see life so much about winning and losing, but I do see it as, I understand how little control we actually have over our lives. It's very, very small. We're such a pathetic sort of element on this earth that could be just washed away tomorrow or whenever, And so realizing at that point just how little control I had over everything made me realize that whatever I had a chance to control, that I had to do my very best every single day to make the most of. And that changed my life. So it's my idea of, or desire to want to control the things I can, doesn't come from I want to control everything. It comes very much from the realization that I know that I've only got such a small amount of opportunity to control. But so it's very important that I make the most of that opportunity. And I try to get the team members to understand that their lives are largely out of their control. So whatever you can take control of, please try and do. Within that process, I fell on a philosophy that I use to this day, that it's very true for me in my moments. Your external reality always reflects your internal truth. So it's incredible when you try and keep control of such small detail, I'll give you a little example. I might be trying to sell a property and I'm struggling. And, we've just gone through that battle that we're trying to go through. And this is a good one. And so I'm getting frustrated out there at my Greenvale property, which you know well. And I'm thinking to myself, this is driving me crazy. Like, we're here each week, buyers come in, buyers go out. Well, about 10 days ago, I thought, I've got to get that Portico painted underneath because that's annoying me. And buyers are mentioning it. They think that it's got water damage. It doesn't have water damage, but it just doesn't look good. We'll get that painted. I want to get the tree cleaned up in the backyard to make it feel a bit more spacious and, et cetera, et cetera. So I actioned that because I was trying to find solutions, not, just working on what they might be. Well, you and I both know that then from there, you also were looking for solutions in your own way. And lo and behold, we're moving in the right direction and we probably get our solutions. So I do believe that these things are interconnected, where you do something within your control and it has an impact on those things in the external world that you don't have control over, but it does influence your outcomes. And that's sort of how I try and, drive my daily activity, but also the business in general. Yeah.
Tim, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful note to finish this podcast. I've known you for quite a while, and I know you well, but I've learned so much more from you just from this opportunity to record a podcast. This is why I love podcasting, Tim, because we chat fairly regularly. But you get somebody, in front of a microphone, you start chatting, and there's so many more things that sort of unfold. So I'm very, very grateful for sharing your story and for sharing, your journey with H&B.
I appreciate it, Alex. It's fantastic. And I always enjoy our conversations, but like you say, it's not a bad platform for me and you just to talk a little bit more profoundly, because I think the information's there at times. It's nice to share it. Yeah.
It's great to share. Tim, thank you very much. For everyone else tuning in, so grateful for you joining us. We really love having you on the podcast. Do give us your feedback. It's really important to know what you like about the podcast and where we can improve. But until next time, thanks, goodbye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.